13-year-old Daniel lay in his bed, staring at the dark ceiling. The house was quiet, but he couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. For the past few nights, strange things had been happening. His bedroom door would creak open on its own. Cold air would brush against his skin, even when the windows were closed. But the worst part was the whispers. Soft, chilling whispers that called his name. Tonight, the whispers were louder. The air felt heavy. Daniel pulled his blanket up to his chin, trying to ignore the eerie feeling. Then, suddenly, his bedside lamp flickered. His heart pounded. He held his breath, watching the shadows dance on the walls. And then, he saw it. A figure stood at the foot of his bed. It was a woman. She wore a long, flowing white dress. Her black hair fell over her pale face. Her dark, hollow eyes stared at him, unblinking. Daniel's body froze. His throat tightened. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice like a cold breeze. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. His chest felt heavy, as if invisible hands were pressing down on him. "You don't have to be afraid," she said. "I won't hurt you." The woman took a step closer. The floor didn't creak under her feet. She floated toward him, her movements smooth and unnatural. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he thought it might explode. She reached out her hand. "I have been waiting for you." Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, wishing it was a dream. But when he opened them, she was still there, closer now. Her ice-cold fingers brushed against his cheek. A wave of shivers ran down his spine. "You are special, Daniel," she whispered. "We are meant to be together." The room became darker. The air thickened. Daniel could barely breathe. Then, the woman leaned down, her cold lips near his ear. "From now on, you are mine," she whispered. Suddenly, the lamp flickered again, and she was gone. The silence was deafening. Daniel lay frozen in bed, his body shaking. He wanted to run, to scream, to tell someone. But who would believe him? He wasn't sure if this was a nightmare. But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was real. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, Daniel felt exhausted. His body was weak, and his mind was filled with fear. He kept thinking about the woman, the ghost, who appeared in his room last night. Was it a dream? No, it felt too real. At school, Daniel couldn't focus. His best friend, Mike, noticed his pale face. "Are you okay?" Mike asked. Daniel hesitated, then whispered, "There's someone in my room." "A woman. A ghost." Mike laughed. "A ghost? Come on, Daniel. Maybe you were just dreaming." Daniel didn't argue. He knew no one would believe him. But deep inside, he was terrified. That night, he locked his door and covered himself with his blanket. His hands were shaking. He kept repeating to himself, "She won't come back, she won't come back." But at exactly midnight, the air in the room turned cold. The lights flickered, and Daniel's heart raced. And then, she was there. The ghostly woman appeared at the foot of his bed, just like before. Her dark, hollow eyes looked at him with sadness and longing. "You locked the door," she whispered. "You don't want me here." Daniel's voice trembled. Who are you?" She stepped closer, her white dress floating above the floor. "My name is Evelyn," she said. "I have been alone for many years, until I found you." Daniel's hands clenched the blanket. "Why me?" Evelyn smiled softly. "Because you are special." She sat on the edge of his bed, and Daniel felt the mattress sink. His body froze. How could a ghost touch things? Evelyn gently placed a cold hand on his chest. "I love you, Daniel. And now, we will always be together." Daniel gasped. "No, you're a ghost. This is wrong." Evelyn's expression darkened. "You don't understand, Daniel." She leaned closer, her voice turning into a whisper. "I am carrying your child." Daniel's heart stopped. His skin turned ice cold. What?" he stammered. Evelyn smiled, her hollow eyes shining. "You are going to be a father, Daniel. And nothing can change that." The room fell silent. The lights stopped flickering. But Daniel's world had just shattered. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. This was not just a nightmare. It was real. Daniel sat on his bed, his whole body trembling. His mind refused to believe what Evelyn had just said. "I am carrying your child." Those words echoed in his head like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. His throat was dry, his hands ice cold. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "You're a ghost." "I'm just a kid." Evelyn smiled, her pale face glowing in the dim light. "Love does not follow human rules, Daniel. Our bond is beyond life and death." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, this isn't real." But deep inside, he knew it was. Every night, she came closer. Every night, her whispers became more powerful. And now, she claimed to be carrying his child. His stomach twisted in fear. He had to get out. With a burst of energy, he jumped off the bed and ran toward the door. His fingers grabbed the doorknob. It wouldn't move. The door was locked, but not with a key. Something unseen was holding it shut. Daniel's breath came in short gasps. He pulled harder, but the door refused to open. It was as if invisible hands were keeping him trapped. "You can't leave me, Daniel," Evelyn whispered behind him. He spun around, pressing his back against the door. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, watching him with sorrowful eyes. "Don't fight it," she said. "This is destiny." Tears burned in Daniel's eyes. "Why me? What do you want from me?" Evelyn stepped closer, her cold presence filling the room. "I chose you, Daniel. Because you have a pure soul. You are the only one who can bring my child into this world." Daniel's body shivered in horror. "I'm just a kid. This is crazy." Evelyn tilted her head. "You will understand soon." Suddenly, the room grew colder. Daniel's breath turned white in the air. The walls trembled as a low, ghostly whisper filled the space. He is ours now, Daniel clutched his ears. The voices were everywhere. The lights flickered wildly. Shadows twisted on the walls. The air became thick, pressing against his chest. Then, everything went black. Daniel collapsed onto the floor. The last thing he heard before darkness swallowed him was Evelyn's voice. "Sleep now, my love. When you wake up, everything will change." Daniel's eyes slowly opened. His head was pounding, his body felt weak. The room was eerily silent. He tried to sit up, but his limbs felt heavy. For a moment, he thought it was a dream. Maybe he had imagined everything, the ghost, her whispers, her terrifying words. But then, he saw her. Evelyn stood beside his bed, watching him with a soft smile. Her pale fingers gently brushed his hair. "You're awake," she whispered. Daniel flinched and pulled away. "Stay away from me," he gasped, his voice shaking. Evelyn's smile faded. "Why are you afraid? I told you, we are meant to be together." Daniel's breathing was fast. His mind screamed for him to run, to escape. But deep inside, he knew there was no way out. "I'm just a kid," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand what's happening. How can a ghost be pregnant?" Evelyn tilted her head. "Because you are special, Daniel. You were the key to my return." Daniel's skin prickled. "Return." Evelyn stepped closer, her dark eyes locking onto his. "Many years ago, I was betrayed. I was in love, but my lover abandoned me. I died with sorrow in my heart, but I never truly left." Daniel's fingers dug into the blanket. "What does that have to do with me?" Evelyn smiled. "I waited for the perfect soul. A pure, innocent soul that could bring me back to life." Daniel felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. His voice trembled. "You're using me." Evelyn knelt beside him, her cold hand resting on his chest. "Don't think of it that way, my love. You are part of something greater. Soon, I will be reborn, and you will be the father of my child." Daniel's stomach twisted in horror. "This is insane. I won't let this happen." Evelyn sighed, her expression filled with sadness. "You don't have a choice, Daniel. It has already begun." Suddenly, Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest. He clutched his shirt, gasping. His vision blurred. Evelyn leaned close, whispering in his ear. "Soon, you will understand. Soon, we will be a family." Daniel tried to scream, but his body collapsed back onto the bed. Darkness swallowed him again. Daniel's eyes snapped open. His body felt heavy, his mind foggy. He tried to move, but he couldn't. His hands were frozen at his sides. The room was pitch dark, except for a pale glow. Evelyn stood over him, her ghostly form flickering like a dying flame. "It's almost time," she whispered. Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears. "Time for what?" he choked out. Evelyn knelt beside him, placing a cold hand on his stomach. For our child to be born. Daniel's whole body stiffened. No, this isn't real. Evelyn smiled softly. It is real, Daniel. You are part of something bigger than yourself. You are the bridge between life and death. Tears burned in Daniel's eyes. I never wanted this. Please, let me go. Evelyn's expression darkened. I love you, Daniel. But you cannot escape your fate. Suddenly, the room shook. The walls twisted, shadows slithered across the ceiling. A deep, eerie whisper filled the air. He belongs to us now, Daniel's chest tightened. He gasped for breath as a strange energy pulsed through him. His vision blurred. And then, he felt it. A cold, unnatural force inside him. Growing, moving. His stomach churned. His skin burned. He wasn't just trapped. He was changing. Daniel let out a blood-curdling scream as a searing pain exploded in his body. His veins turned black, his bones felt like they were shattering from the inside. Evelyn caressed his face, her hollow eyes glowing. You are becoming one of us, Daniel. Soon, you will understand. Daniel's vision darkened. His thoughts twisted into something inhuman. His body was no longer his own. And then, everything went silent. The whispers stopped. The shaking ceased. Evelyn smiled. Welcome home, my love. Daniel's lips curled into a smile. But it wasn't his smile. His soul was gone. He was no longer Daniel. He was something else. Something monstrous. And the horror was only beginning.